What's the biggest lie in web development? That those websites, the ones that win awards, are impossible to build alone. That it takes a team of 50 developers and probably some dark magic to make it happen. They want you to believe that those insane animations, those mind-bending interactions, and those perfectly smooth transitions, they're out of your league, reserved for elite agencies with massive teams. But not today. Because today, you'll build an award-winning website you've always dreamed of. The kind of site that makes both Apple and SpaceX designers take screenshots. And I ain't joking, seriously. This isn't just another landing page tutorial or a basic website guide. This is everything you've been searching for in those 3 a.m. Googling sessions. Every butter-smooth animation technique, every design hack, every how did I do that moment explained in a detailed step-by-step course teaching you how to build a Zentry-inspired site, a gaming website that won a Site of the Day award. I'm referring to Zentry.com, a metagame platform that has a super unique website. This course will teach you how to build some of the parts from their website. And while building it, I'm sure you'll want to play some games. So check them out, and thanks for the inspiration, Zentry.com. You'll recreate this stunning website using React and Tailwind CSS, featuring an animated floating navbar with music animations, a hero section playing a full-screen video with an amazing hover effect transition switching to the next and next video, which then expands in full screen. A butter-smooth about section showing animated text with an image transition as we scroll down the website. See how smooth it is? Immediately after, we have a trendy bento grid design with a card tilt effect as you move your cursor. This is coded completely from scratch. Trust me, no external libraries used. With yet another cool section with animated text with images in a completely different shape, thanks to CSS magical properties with a nice hover effect. And finally, a nice little call to action section with different images, with different cool shapes, and a minimal footer. Everything is neatly done and super responsive, working as expected on every device, with no performance issues. This video is for everyone who's been told, that's too advanced for a single developer. Or you need an agency to build something like that. Because after today, the only thing standing between you and your first awards nomination is continuing to watch this video. And the first step in building our app is setting up our hosting. You can think of this project as a career asset, designed to showcase everything you're capable of, making you an attractive candidate for any job or freelance opportunity. I highly recommend Hostinger for hosting this app, especially since they're running the biggest Black Friday sale ever. I'll go for the premium plan as it allows us to host 100 websites with free SSL for HTTPS security, a free email for that professional touch, and even a free domain name to give your website a good name. And because I've partnered with Hostinger, you get an even bigger discount. Click the special link in the description, click Claim Deal, and add to cart. Here, we have to choose the period of our hosting. I'll choose 48 months to save the most. Enter your JavaScript Mastery coupon code and check out. Once you're done with the purchase, we're ready to set everything up. Starting with the Hostinger's guided setup, I'll just skip, create a website. We'll build a website from scratch, so we can just say empty right here. And right here, you can choose a domain name. Or it's possible that you don't yet know what you want your website to be called, so you can use a temporary domain name right here. But in this case, I'll say award-winning-website.com. Let's see if that is available. Oh, would you look at that? It actually is. I'll choose it and click next. Here, you can choose where your audience is located, and that's it. The setup can begin. And since I already chose a domain, the SSL certificate is immediately getting installed. We'll return to this dashboard at the end of the course, so once you build your website, you can deploy it. With that said, let's dive straight into the code. Hello, and welcome to the start of another amazing build. Since we are recreating an award-winning website, I'll start from bare beginnings by creating a new folder on my desktop, and I'll call it Awwards. Once you create it, open it up within your favorite code editor. In this case, I'll be using the WebStorm IDE, which as of recently is completely free for non-commercial use. So once you open up the folder on your code editor, open up an integrated terminal. Within it, run npm create vite add latest /, which will create a new Vite application right within our current folder. It's asking us whether you want to install the Vite installer, so say why. Yes. In my case, it says that the current directory is not empty, but that's totally okay. We can say remove everything that is on there and continue. We're starting from scratch. After that, it's gonna ask you for the framework of your choice. In this case, we'll proceed with React. It's gonna ask you for your flavor of the JavaScript language. If you like TypeScript, feel free to proceed with that. In this case, I'll go with just JavaScript. And that's it. After that, you can run npm install and then npm run dev to run the app within the browser. That's gonna spin it up incredibly quickly on localhost 5173. So let's click it, and here it is. Vite plus React empty starter repo. Now we are ready to start turning this into something that looks a little more like this, with crazy animations and more. And to make it happen, we'll use React, the library for web and native user interfaces. But of course, feel free to replicate this using any other library or framework of your choice. Everything that I show here, with a little bit of knowledge and tweaking, you should be able to fit just the framework, language, or technology that you prefer. Of course, we'll build it using Tailwind CSS, which is a CSS framework that allows you to very quickly style your applications while making them completely custom. I'll also show you a couple of simple looking but quite effective tools, like this CSS clip maker that's gonna bring our app to life once we integrate 3D and GSAP animations into it. And once we're done building it, I'll teach you how to host it on your custom domain name using Hostinger. And I just gotta mention that every single technology you'll use to build this project is completely free. So you don't have to worry that you'll be stuck behind some kind of a paywall or that you'll be required to pay something. It is completely free to build. The only thing you need are your skills. Oh, and since I'm telling you about all the cool stuff that I'm using, a lot of people ask me what kind of browser is this, where there's no top bar with a lot of icons and everything. This is called Arc, and it's a browser with a collapsible left sidebar that allows you to focus on the main content. But of course, it still has everything you might need for debugging and networking, as it's based on Chromium. To get it, you can just go to arc.net. Again, not affiliated, just wanted to share this cool thing with you as always. But with that said, let's go ahead and explore the file and folder structure that was generated for us when we installed a Vite application. Starting from the source folder, which is the most important folder, you'll notice that we have a lot of stuff which we might not need right now, such as the app CSS, index CSS, and a lot of boilerplate code within the app.jsx. So let's go ahead and clean up this app file by simply removing everything and running RAFCE. This stands for React Arrow Function Export Component, which just creates a simple functional React component. And if that didn't work for you, you might need to head over to plugins or extensions and then install any kind of a React snippets package. With that said, let's also clean up the index and app.css since we won't be needing them. Now that we have a bit of a cleaner working environment, let's go ahead and set up Tailwind CSS. I don't want to just give you the commands. I want to teach you how you can do it in your future applications by following the docs. So head over to tailwindcss.com and go over to Get Started. You can scroll down to see the installation steps. And the first thing you'll have to do is install the Tailwind CSS as a dev dependency. But just to make sure, let me go to search and see if this is the installation for Vite for React. If you scroll down right here, you'll notice here it's a bit different. We also need post CSS and auto prefixer. So make sure to head over to the docs page where you have to install Tailwind with Vite. So I'll copy this command, open up my terminal. I'll actually create a new tab and then paste it. npm install-d, Tailwind CSS, post CSS auto prefixer, and then npx Tailwind CSS init-p. This will initialize a new Tailwind config within your project. So as the second part, you'll have to override that Tailwind config by adding these two parts into the content. Again, you can just copy it and override it right here. Next, you'll have to add Tailwind CSS directives to our CSS. So let's copy it. Let's create a new file within the source folder, and let's call it index.css, within which we can import those Tailwind CSS directives. After that, you can head over to your app.jsx, and we can turn this div into a main tag and create an h1 that's going to say something like, welcome to Awwwards. I'll give it a class name equal to text-5xl to be extra large, text-orange-500, and font-bold. Now head over to your first terminal, stop it from running by pressing Ctrl-C, and then rerun it again with npm run dev. If you do that and head back to localhost 5173, you'll be able to see this large orange H1 that says welcome to Awwwards. So congrats! That means that we have set up our React application successfully and also successfully added Tailwind CSS to it. Let's continue setting up our project by first setting up the font families, which we'll use within our landing page. You'll notice that there's quite a few. We have this interesting one where some elements, like the N in this case or the A, has this very interesting element to it. Then we have this one, and overall, everything is just completely custom made, including the fonts. I took some time to gather all of these fonts, and I'll give them to you so you can put them right here instead of this empty public folder. So go ahead and delete the existing one, and also delete the assets folder, because everything will be inside of the public folder. Now head over to the description of this video and find a link pointing to a GitHub repository containing the code for this entire project. Below the code, you'll be able to see a README file, which contains all of the information about this project, as well as a link pointing to the assets. Head over there, click it, download it, unzip it, and then simply drag and drop it to the root of your directory. It's gonna look something like this, and it'll contain the audio, which we wanna use in our website, as well as the fonts, which I was telling you about, as well as some images and even videos, which are gonna make our landing page that much more dynamic. So now that we have those fonts, let's actually use them within the index.css file. Here, you can use a Tailwind CSS layer property and define the base. Base is used for defining some basic properties, like the font faces. So we can define the first font face by specifying a font family and making it equal to circular-web. This is the name of one of our fonts. Once you define it, you also have to pass a source pointing to URL where it's contained. In our case, it's gonna be under /fonts/web-book.woff2, which is the format. And you can exit the URL and define the format by saying WOFF2. You might get a red squiggly line saying that the file doesn't exist, but don't worry about it because it's right here under fonts. And make sure you have a double and not a triple F right here, because that's the correct name of the format. Let's also add all of the other font faces by saying add font face. This one will be a font-family of general, and it'll have a source equal to URL pointing to /fonts/general dot, and then the same type of the font, with a format being the same format. We can add one more font face, and this one will have a font-family equal to Robert-medium. What an interesting font name. It's gonna have a source equal to URL, which is gonna point to /fonts/Robert-medium.woof, and we're gonna have a format of woof as well. Or should I say woof, as it's a WOFF2 format. And finally, we're gonna have another font face, the last one in our application, with a font family equal to Robert-regular. That's gonna be within a string, and it's gonna have a source equal to URL pointing to /fonts/Robert-regular.woof, and a format of woof. And yep, you got JavaScript mastery barking on the channel before GTA 6 was released. But with that said, now that we have those font faces right here, let's actually use them within our Tailwind config. So you can head over to tailwind.config.js, and let's add them to our theme by extending it, and then extending the font family specifically with all of those fonts. First, we want to add Zentry, which is going to be equal to the name of Zentry, and it's going to be a sans serif font. After that, we want to add a general font, which is going to be same thing, general sans serif. Then we want to add a circular-web, which is going to be, once again, a similar thing, circular web sans serif. After that, we're going to have a Robert-medium, which is going to be Robert-medium sans serif. And finally, Robert-regular sans serif. So this way, we'll be able to use these fonts within our application. Let's just make sure that we have all 5 right here. And yep, we do. Now for just a second, let's head back over to index.css. I'll collapse this layer, and at the top of it, I'll modify my body by giving it a font family equal to general sans and sans serif, like this, just to make sure that every element, unless specified otherwise, uses this general font. We can also specify a width of the body to be equal to 100 dvw, and dvw is actually a new CSS property that is very similar to regular VW, which stands for vertical width, but it solves the classic scrollbar problem that happens when the page has a vertical scrollbar. While we're here, let's also give it a background color to make sure that our application looks great. That's going to be hash dff0. That's the color I want to use. And I'll give it the overflow X of hidden, so we don't get any unnecessary scroll bars. And I just realized that I'm in the CSS file, not in JavaScript, so we don't have to wrap it in string signs. So now what do you say that we test out some of these fonts by heading over to our app and giving it to this H1 by saying font dash, and now you can choose any one you like. In this case, I'll go with font circular web, and you can see that it immediately changed. In the same way, you can do font dash Robert dash medium, and I think it's a bit different. Either way, let's remove this font for now because we have more important stuff to focus on, which are the colors, specifically the color theme, which we'll be using within our application. In the same way we have extended the fonts, now we want to extend colors. If you check out the finished application, you'll notice that we'll use some of the colors often, like this purple one, maybe even this black one, or this yellow one on this button. So instead of every time saying something like text dash and then in square brackets manually specifying the color, like what I'm doing here, and then imagine if one changes, it would just be a mess because you would have to change it across all the files. In this case, we'll just create a list of predefined colors, and then you can say text dash blue dash 50, which is immediately going to give you that custom variant of a color. And just recently, I dove deep into setting up a Tailwind CSS theme for every application, no matter which one it is, in my Next.js course. Here, I dive deep into telling you exactly what you have to do from scratch and even how to extract those colors and fonts from a Figma design. So if you've been wanting to dive into Next.js a bit deeper for quite some time now, well, I really do think now is the chance. So go to jsmastery.pro and join the course. It'll be a great thing for you to do after you watch this video. But with that said, I still want to teach you how you would go about adding custom colors. So if you go over below the font family, still within the extend, you can say colors and then specify different variations, such as blue. Within blue, you can create different shades of blue, such as a 50 version of blue, which can be DFDFF0. I used a color picker and then picked this color from another website. We have about 5 or 7 colors to add, so bear with me and let's add them together. The 75 variation of the blue will be hash DFDFF2. We have a 100 variation, which will be hash F0F2FA. Next, we have a 200, which is going to be hash 101010. That's going to be a black color. And finally, a 300, which is going to be hash 4FB7DD. That's going to be this primary blue color that we'll use throughout the website. We can also create a variation of violet, specifically a 300 variation, which is going to be hash 5724FF. And finally, below violet, we'll have a 100 variation of yellow, which is going to be hash 8E983F. And another one will be a 300, which is going to be hash EDFF66. This is going to be a bright yellow, as you can see here on the left side, where we can open up the color picker. Great. Now let's test out this violet color by going back to our H1 and saying text dash violet dash, I believe it was 300, right? And there we go. That works like a charm. This means that you have successfully set up both the fonts and the color theme, which are the two most important parts of a Tailwind config. So with that in mind, immediately in the next lesson, we'll be able to dive into the hero section. So let's do that next. Exciting stuff coming up. To get started with the hero section, let's go ahead and create a new folder in the source folder, and let's call it components. Within the components folder, I can create a new file, which I'll call hero.jsx. And within it, I'll run RAFCE, a React arrow function component. Now that I have it, I'll simply import it at the top of the app. So let's go over here. And within the main, instead of this h1, I will now render the hero section. Don't forget to import it from /components/hero. And while we're here, let's also give a class name to this main tag, which is going to be equal to relative min-h-screen. So this way, the minimum height of the screen will be 100% of the view height. We can do the same thing for the width, w-screen, and overflow-x-hidden, so we don't get those ugly scroll bars. Now I can head over to the hero, and we can start implementing it. But first, I've opened up my browser on localhost 5173, so we can see the changes that we make in our editor live on the right side. Let's start by giving this div a class name equal to relative h-d vertical height. And once again, if this dv height or dvw are a bit weird because they're completely new, well, the D stands for dynamic. The sizes of the dynamic viewport percentage units are not stable even while the viewport itself is unchanged. Using these can cause the content to resize. In this case, this is exactly what we want, which is why we're using them. I'll also define a W screen, which is going to give it a full width. And finally, the overflow X of hidden. Within it, I'll create another div, and that div will play the video. Remember that huge video which plays on full screen? Well, yes, this is the div that'll contain it. So let's give it an ID equal to video-frame, and let's give it a class name equal to relative z of 10, so it appears above other content, h-dvh, w screen, overflow-hidden, rounded-lg, and bg blue of 75. Within it, we can display another div, and within that div, we'll have another div that'll have a class name equal to mask-clip-path. Now, what is this? Is this some kind of a Tailwind property? Is this a Tailwind CSS class? Well, not really, because we cannot see anything if we hover over it or select it. So this means that this is a special class name which we have to write. And to be able to reuse some Tailwind CSS classes, for example, see how we type the same thing here and on the homepage. It's very similar. Imagine if you could just say something like max width, and this would automatically apply all of these classes both here and here. We can do that by expanding our index.css file. So if you head over here, right below the base, you can actually define another add layer, but this time for utility classes. And within it, you can say something like dot absolute-center, and then you can say add apply, and you can apply whatever class name you want, like absolute, top-1/2, and so on. And then you can use this class name within your code. There's going to be plenty of classes which we're going to write throughout this video, so I want to provide some of them to you to make your life a bit easier. So in the same GitHub repo where you found the assets, you can also find a complete index.css. So simply copy it and override whatever you have here. You'll notice that it includes some class names for images, headings, and even some fonts, as well as the fonts we wrote at the start. Now, if you hover over the mask clip path, it'll actually know that it is a special class within the index.css, which applies a specific polygon. I'll explain exactly how I got to this later on. But for now, let's get something showing within that div. We can continue by giving it another class name of absolute-center, which will center it. We can give it a position of absolute, a Z of 50, so it appears on top, a size of 64, a cursor of pointer, overflow of hidden, and rounded dash LG. Within it, we'll create another div, which will actually be a mini video player. There we go. You can see it here in the middle, and it is clickable. What this actually is this video player that allows you to change the background or the video playing in the background just by clicking on it. It's a pretty cool feature, and I'm so excited to show you how it works. So let's first get that video playing, and then once the user clicks on it, we can show it in the background as well. To do that, we have to start adding some functionality. So I'll define a new function, const handle mini vd video click. So this is going to be the mini video player click. We have to know when a user has clicked something, and we also have to keep track of which video is playing or the index of that video. So let's define a couple of use state fields. I'll say use state, and I'll use the use state snippet to quickly create it. I'll call the first state current index, as well as set current index, and at the start it'll be set to 1. Let's not forget to import use state from React. Alongside the current index, I also want to know whether the user has clicked anything. So at the start, I'll create another use state snippet, which will have a name of has clicked, and set has clicked at the start equal to false. By the way, see how it actually tells me what this variable here does? Like it says use state's first parameter is actually for its initial state. In the last video, many of you asked me, how did I add that? What kind of package is it? Well, this is actually a feature built right into WebStorm, so I didn't have to do anything to add it. I'll also add another use state snippet, and I'll call this one is loading, and set is loading at the start set to true, because the video typically does take some time to load at the start. And finally, I'll create another use state for the number of videos that has loaded. So I'll say loaded videos, which at the start will be equal to 0. We can also define the number of total videos which you want to play. In this case, I'll set it to 4. And we need to define a reference which will allow us to then switch between those videos, or to target the player within which will play the videos. To do that, we can say const next vd video ref is going to be equal to use ref, which we have to import from React. And at the start, it'll be set to null. In React, you use a ref whenever you want to target a specific DOM element, like the iframe or like the div within which we want to play that video. You can see here, this div has an ID of video frame. Now, once we click on this mini player, we want to set has clicked to be equal to true. And we also want to set the current index to be equal to a function where we get the previous index, and then we simply say prev index plus 1. So we're always incrementing that index with a new one. Now we can handle this mini video click right here once we click this div. Now to actually be able to see what's happening, let's continue implementing this div by giving it a class name of origin-center. But before I start adding more classes, let's actually implement the video right within it. I will render an HTML5 self-closing video tag and give it a ref equal to next video ref. And you know what? I actually don't like shortening things like VD. Who knows whether that's a video or something else. So I will rename it to next video ref. Always a bit better to be a bit more descriptive than to shorten it out. And now I will say next video ref. And a video component also needs a source to the video to be played. So right here above the return, let's create a new const get video source equal to a function where we get the index, and then it automatically returns a path of videos / hero dash dynamically render the index .mp4. And let's properly spell videos. Again, this is pretty cool. Even though this is not an error, notice how WebStorm noticed that there's a typo in the word videos. So I will definitely fix that. And this is giving us the path of each specific video source. So let's say source is equal to get video source, to which we can pass the current index plus 1. So why is it plus 1? Well, because we have this large video, and then once we click on the inner one, it actually is going to play it on the big screen. So this smaller one always has to be one in front of the main video player. Next, let's make sure that this video loops. So we're going to give it a loop as well as a muted property, and the ID equal to current dash video. And we can give it a class name of size dash 64, origin dash center, scale of 150, object dash cover, and object dash center. Finally, we can also render the onLoaded data, which is a special handler that allows us to call a function once the data loads. And here we can call a handle video load function. This is a new function which we can create right here at the top. Let's call it const handle video load. And it's going to be equal to an arrow function that will simply set the loaded videos to be equal to prev loaded videos plus 1, like this. Now we can scroll down and we can provide additional class names to this div containing this video player. So let's give it a class name of scale of 50 to make it a bit smaller at the start. Let's give it opacity of 0 because at the start it should not be present, but transition all, meaning that we can animate some properties throughout a duration of 500 milliseconds, ease in, and we're going to animate it on hover. So on hover, we're going to change the scale back to 100 and the opacity to 100. Now, if I hover over it, check this out. It appears as if we're trying to get into this video. So it's similar right here. There we go. What is missing is that once we click it, we actually show it in the background. Now, if you click on this video, it'll actually switch it to the next one, and the next one, and the next one until it breaks, because we're always going one more right here. But once we pass the number 3, then we're lost. We have no 4, 5, 6, or so on. So we can use a special trick. We can be very smart about it, and we can only try to go up to 3, but then if it's more than that, we need to go back to 0 and start all over again. That is the perfect use case for the modulo operator. It returns the remainder of the division of one number being divided by another. So for example, if you divide 5 by 2, you're going to get 1, because 5 divided by 2 will be 2 times 2, and then the remainder will be 1. In our case, if you try to divide 1 by 4, which is the total number of videos, you're going to actually get 1 because you cannot divide it. So let me show you how we can implement it in our case to make sure that we can only go up to the last video and not any further. I'll create a new variable called const upcoming video index, and that's going to be equal to current index modulo total videos, and then I'll wrap it in parentheses and give it a +1. So what this will do is it will try to divide 1 by 4, or rather 0 by 4 at the start, where the remainder is going to be 0. To that 0, we will add 1. So 0 plus 1 will end up being 1. After that, it will try to divide 1 by 4, which will leave us the remainder of 1. So it's going to go to 2. And in this case, I should actually be putting the modulo operator instead of the division because it's a remainder operation. After that, we'll try to divide 2 by 4, which is going to leave 2 plus 1 is 3. And finally, it's going to do 3 by 4, which will give us 4, which is the last index. So finally, once you do that last modulo operator, the remainder will be 0, and we once again start from 1. Isn't that beautiful? That's just some math right here. So now we can set the current index to be equal to upcoming video index. Great. Now, if we reload, you can keep pressing, and we actually have 3 videos, so 1 is extra right here. So for now, I will just put the total number of videos to be 3. If we do that, you can naturally switch between all of these videos. This is great. Now, let's continue right below this video and below 2 more divs, because now is the time to create another video component, which will be our primary background video player. It'll have a ref equal to next video ref and a source equal to get video source. But this time we're not passing the upcoming index, we're passing the current index. Oh, and here we no longer have to use the current index +1. We can just use the upcoming video index because we have created a variable out of that. So check this out. You can click it and it actually changes on this top video player. This is pretty amazing. Like, check this out. We have this scene with this rock and buildings. I click it, it shows up here. We have the scene with this boy, and we click it, shows up at the top. We have this woman right here. We click it, shows up at the top. I mean, this is pretty cool, I gotta say, but it's gonna be so much cooler once we actually implement the video player so that it shows up and you go into the scene, you enter it. So to continue working on this amazing hero section, let's give this video a loop property. Let's make it muted. Let's give it the ID equal to next video. And let's give it a class name equal to absolute-center. Let's also give it invisible. I'll give it the absolute positioning, z index of 20, size of 64, object-cover, and object-center. And on loaded data, I'll give it the handle video load. So right now you cannot really see the big video just yet, but you will be able to see it soon. We just have to animate it. The reason why this video is initially hidden is because we have to apply the animation where we have that zoom in effect. As you can see, it slowly zooms in. So just below this video player, which will have that zoom in effect, we can go below and we can create another video player, which will have a source equal to get video source. And to it, we'll check if the current index is triple equal to the total videos -1. That means that we're at the last index, and in that case, we want to reset it to 1, else we're gonna set it to the current index. Now you can see that again. Let's give it a property of autoplay. I'll also give it loop, muted, and a class name of absolute, left-0, top-0, size-full, object-cover, and object-center. And there we go. Now we're starting to dive into the world. And check this out. I click it, and now it actually plays. This is pretty crazy, I gotta say. Looking great. Again, we must not forget that this looks even better on desktop. And I mean, this video on its own is looking amazing. These designers and animators have done such a phenomenal job. But again, keep in mind, we will turn this into an actual high-performing website as well. So for the time being, I'll go back to mobile view, and I will also give this video an on-loaded data property to handle video load. Finally, we can go one div below, and we can create an h1 with a class name equal to special-font, hero-heading, and we can say something like gaming. I think that's what it says right here at the bottom of the original website as well. But check this one thing out. The A in gaming is special. It has this line in between. So we can change it by putting it in bold signs like this. Gaming. Let's also style it further by giving it a position of absolute, bottom of 5, right of 5, Z of 40, and text-blue of 75. And check this out. We have this gaming text right here at the bottom right. Right below the H1, let's create a div. And this div will have a class name equal to absolute, left-0, top-0, Z of 40, and size of full. And right now we're creating this top part of the website with the redefined title, a subheading, and a call to action button. So within it, let's render another div that's gonna have a class name of margin top of 24, padding X of 5, and on small devices, padding X of 10. Within it, we can finally render an H1 that'll say redefine, and then I'll put the N in the bold signs, and then I'll say E at the end, because this will make sure that the N has that special flair. So I'll give it a class name equal to special-font, hero-heading, and text-blue-100. There we go. That's much better. Right below the H1, let's render a p tag that'll have a class name equal to margin bottom of 5, max-w of 64, font-robert-regular, and text-blue-100. And it can say enter the metagame layer. I'll put a break right here because we want to show something in a new line, and I'll say unleash the play economy. Okay, that's pretty cool. We have some kind of a subheading right there. And below it, we want to render a button. Now, this button will be a completely custom component, which we'll reuse in many other places within our application. So let me actually cover this video for the time being, as the video can be a bit distracting while we're coding. And let's create a custom button component by going to Components and creating a new button.jsx. I'll run RAFCE, and I'll import it right here within the hero below the p tag by rendering a new self-closing button component. And if I go back here, you should be able to see a button. For the time being, I will stop the video from playing by heading over to videos and remove the autoplay from one of these videos. So if I reload, it will not autoplay. Later on, we can uncomment this to just be amazed at the great animation. For now, let's pass some props into this button so we can differentiate it from some other buttons. I'll give it an ID of watch-trailer, a title of watch trailer, a left icon equal to, and now this is the first time we're ever using icons in this application. So we actually want to install a package that allows us to use many different icons. And that's, of course, React icons. It allows you to pick any icon library you want and immediately use icons from it. We can install it through npm by simply saying npm install react-icons. So this is exactly what I'll do. And once it gets installed, I'll simply call it ti location arrow coming from React icons. There we go. And finally, I'll pass some container class to this button of bg yellow 300, flex-center, and a gap of 1. If I do that and go back, I can now go into this button, accept those props, and then create this reusable button component so that we can reuse it across the page. To accept the props, you can just get the props here and then say something like props.title, I think it was. That's now going to say watch trailer. What you can also do is destructure the props. By destructuring the props, you don't have to say props.something every time. You just use it like this. It still works, but it's a bit easier. So let's destructure all of the other properties as well, such as ID, right icon, left icon, and the container class. Once you get them, we can start creating our button by first wrapping everything in a button component. We can give it an ID equal to ID, a class name equal to group, relative, z of 10, w of fit, cursor of pointer, overflow of hidden, rounded dash full, background of violet 50, padding x of 7, padding y of 3, and text dash black, and it'll render the left icon. There we go. You can see it right here. And we can also make this class name dynamic by turning it into a dynamic template string, just like so. And then we can render the container class as well, right at the end of the other classes. If you do that and continue writing the text, it'll also apply these additional class names such as bg yellow 300, flex center, and a gap of 1. So let's create a span within this button with a class name equal to relative, inline dash flex, overflow dash hidden, font dash general, text dash extra small, and uppercase. Within it, we can create a div that'll render the title that says watch trailer. And right outside of the span, we can render the right icon if there is any. This is looking good to me, but it looks like the BG Yellow 300 class name is not actually getting passed. Container class right here. That's interesting. What if I remove this BG Violet? Will it be passed then? Oh yeah, it is passed. So that means that this class, for some reason, is taking over. What we could do is use something known as a CLSX, which will allow us to more appropriately mix different classes. But we could also just add an exclamation mark at the start of this one, which will make it more important. So this is looking good to me. Now we can go below that button and below 3 more divs. 1, 2, 3. Here, we're going to put a replica of the H1 that says gaming. This one right here. So let's copy it, paste it right here, and instead of text-blue75, we'll put a text black. Now, why are we doing this? Right now, it seems that it's completely hiding this one, right? Well, not really. On this one, I will remove the Z40 because it doesn't have to appear on top. It's actually going to appear at the bottom. Check this out. As I'm scrolling, see how when the video is moving, there's this new gaming that appears below the video. I mean, this is just amazing. So we'll implement that animation very soon. But with that in mind, we have a fully functional video player. And if you click in the middle, sometimes it skips. You notice how I clicked, but it didn't actually play that video. But other times it is working incredibly well, especially if I turn on the autoplay. So now if I move over and keep clicking, it's going to keep switching the videos. Again, one time it doesn't do it, but don't worry about that. We'll fix that very soon together. But for now, what do you say that we go ahead and implement some animations? It feels like we don't need them, right? But check this out. Animations will be happening on scroll. This is pretty crazy. Like the video shows up as it's a part of the screen and then it animates. That's not the only animation we want to add though. It's this one that we want to add first. Once you click on the video, it zooms in and it looks like you're entering into that different world. On our version of the application, that's not really happening. It just immediately jumps out. Of course, and we have that bug as well. So what do you say that we implement that animation where you slowly dive into that world? To implement it, I'll scroll up right here and we'll want to start doing the animations. But wait, how can we actually animate stuff on the web? With GSAP, of course, a widely robust JavaScript animation library built for professionals. And as you can see, they have been a site of the day as well. But in this video, you're rebuilding a site of the month, if I'm not mistaken. So GSAP allows you to effortlessly animate anything JavaScript can touch, delivering silky smooth performance and unmatched support. I like what they're saying. I'm already sold. So what do you say that we start adding GSAP to our application? I'll show you how simple it is to install it. We'll just head back to our code base and run npm install add GSAP/React and the GSAP library itself. Once you install it, you'll be able to use the use GSAP hook. That looks something like this. Use GSAP, which you have to import to the top from @GSAP/React. To it, you have to pass a callback function, and then you have to pass some dependencies on when that function will run. That has to be done as the second parameter to the function, where you can say that it'll be executed whenever the current index changes. And we can also add another property called revert on update and set it to true, because we want to revert it to the start every time. And current index will actually be set to dependencies like this. There we go. So now we can start defining the function. So we can say if has clicked. That means that we have entered this new world. And if that is the case, we can call the GSAP, which is the base library, which you have to import from GSAP, dot set. And as the first parameter to the set, you pass the ID or the identifier to the element which you want to animate. So we can say animate the next video by setting the visibility to visible. Next, we also want to set GSAP.to next dash video. So we're animating the next video to the following set of animations, also called tweens. We can set the transform origin to be equal to center. We can give it a scale of 1, a width of 100%, a height of 100% as well, duration of 1, ease of power 1 dot in out, and on start we want to call a callback function that will set the next video ref dot current dot play, so it'll actually play the next video. We also want to animate from, so right below we can say GSAP dot from current video. So what are we going to animate that? Well, we can give it a transform origin of center as well, with a scale of 0, a duration of 1.5, and the ease of power 1 dot in out. I found this one to work the best. And since we're inside of an object here, you have to close it with a comma, not a semicolon. If I do this and reload and press right here, you'll notice that something seems to have broken. Why is that? Well, it says GSAP is not defined. So let's make sure to import GSAP from the GSAP library at the top by saying import GSAP from GSAP. That's going to look something like this. Now, if you go back, click, and then click again, you'll start noticing the animation appear. And this time, it actually fixed the error that we had. It's animating. You see now we are in this world. If I click on this boy, now we can see the boy, it animates. And here we have this woman walking. If I click it, we can see it right here. So this is a beautiful animation that I'm so glad to see in action. But now we have just this single hero section. And I mean, just ending the video right here and calling it a day would be, I think, already pretty good, right? If so, drop a like and leave a comment down below as well. But of course, we want to take it a step further and replicate a couple more sections, such as when you scroll down, we actually want to show this gaming text in this very cool way, and this video will actually collapse into some kind of a rectangle right here at the top, as you can see. Pretty cool effect. So I'll teach you how to replicate that as well. So to achieve that, let's add another use GSAP hook where we have a callback function. And within this one, we don't have to add the dependencies. I can just call gsap.set, and we're going to set a video frame to a specific clip path. Now, bear with me. This is going to be pretty cool. You see the clip path in this final application? You see how it's some kind of a rectangle right here? Well, you can generate your own clip path by using this CSS clip path maker. I think using a trapezoid might make sense, but you can choose whatever shape you like. And then you can simply copy this clip path code. Go back and add it right here. Clip path is going to be equal to, in this case, a string of polygon with these specific values. And check this out. Even though we didn't yet scroll, we have this effect. You can try playing with percentages a bit. I found 14 to work very nice, and then 0, and then we can have something like 72, and maybe we can have a bit less on the bottom as well, like 90, and then 90 here as well. There we go. I think this is looking pretty cool. Now this bottom text is actually visible. But now we only want to apply this on scroll. So let's actually give it a border radius to round the borders a bit of 0, 0, 40%, 10%. There we go. This is giving it a pretty cool effect. And now I'm going to animate the GSAP from. So this is the starting animation from where we want to start. It's going to be the same video frame element. And we want to start from a clip path that is actually a full polygon. So we don't have any cut corners yet. So to achieve that, you can just copy this polygon, paste it here, change the first percentage to 0, and change all of the other ones to 100, at least the ones that have some values. This will actually turn it into a square or a rectangle. Now we can also reset the border radius right here by setting it to 4 zeros. We can give it an ease of power 1 dot in out, and we can also give it some kind of a scroll trigger to know when the animation should happen. So we can say scroll trigger is going to be equal to an object where the trigger is the video frame, the start is the center, the end is the bottom center, and the scrub will be set to true. So it'll animate as we scroll through it or scrub through it. Now you can notice at the start, if you reload, it kind of goes from this full screen to this smaller rectangle. But of course, we want to implement that on scroll. So how can we actually mock that? Well, if I head over to the app, below the hero, let's try to add a section. A self-closing section with a class name of Z0 min age screen and a BG blue 500. If I save this and go back, we're going to get a full blue screen, which kind of allows us to scroll to test our animation. So far, it seems that the animation isn't actually animating. So let's see what else do we have to do to make it happen. First of all, I noticed that we didn't yet put our loading or loaded videos to use. Sometimes it might take a bit longer, so it's always good to handle that at the start, just so we don't forget. So I'll go to the top of our JSX part, and right here above the video frame, I'll say if loading is true, so if is loading is true, in that case, we can render a div. This div will actually be a loader div. So within it, I will render another div with a class name equal to 3body. You'll see soon enough why we're calling it that way. It's going to be 3 little dots that are spinning around each other. And I can also create 3 divs with a class name equal to 3body __ dot and duplicate them 2 more times. If I do that and turn the loading to true right here by default, which it is, we can see the loading right here at the top left corner. But of course, we want to be able to position it a bit better. So let's give this outside div a class name equal to flex-center, absolute, z of 100, h of dvh, w screen, overflow dash hidden, and bg violet of 50. If I save this, now we have a nice looking loading, which actually takes over the entire screen until our videos load. But how are we going to know if they have loaded successfully? Well, we can create a use effect. So right here above this use GSAP, I'll create a use effect where I'm going to check for the dependencies of loaded videos. So whenever loaded videos change, we can then recall this use effect and check if loaded videos is triple equal to total videos -1, then we can set is loading to false. And of course, use effect has to be imported from React. So this is the third React hook that we're using in this hero section. So now if you reload, you'll see the loading for a second, but then immediately the video will appear. Oh, but I just remembered. You know why our animation is being triggered immediately and not on scroll? Scroll trigger is actually a plugin within GSAP. So you have to enable it right at the top to be able to use it. You do that by saying gsap.register plugin, and specifically we'll use the scroll trigger plugin. This scroll trigger is gonna come from import scroll trigger from gsap/all. There we go. Now if we save it, we have a full screen video, which is looking amazing. And if you scroll down, check this out. We're actually animating it. Again, you don't really notice it because you're already all the way down once it happens, but still it is there, right? These animations or micro animations don't have to be big, but once you see them in action, they really change the way that you experience this website. And in this case, it's still super, super optimized. So this is looking great and gets a big pass from my side. And with that, I think we're more or less done with the hero section, which is looking amazing. We have the text on top left and bottom right just to make some space for the video that's appearing in the middle and for users to discover the ability to enter into the world of a different video. So we have this one and this one, as if there are 3 different stories. Oh, but wait, it seems like we currently only have 2. Do we have to update the total videos to 4? 1, 2, 3. There we go. Yeah, that's it. We had to have 4 to actually show all 3 videos. This is looking amazing. Now, what do you want to do next? I'm asking as if I can hear you or as if you can tell me what to do next. But we have 2 options. We can either design the navbar, which is looking pretty simple at the start, but then actually disappears and then reappears once you scroll up because it means you're lost and you want to find something. So it's pretty cool. Or the next section you want to do is this one, a piece of text and an image that animates into a 3rd section. To be completely honest, I would wait on the navbar just a tiny bit more to implement this 2nd very interesting section. This is technically an about section. Typically, about sections on different websites look boring, but here, hey, we're diving into a whole another world. So we can start implementing it by creating a new component in the components folder, and let's call it about.jsx, run rafce right within it, and then import it and use it right here instead of this blue section. We will no longer need it because now we will have our about section. If you add it and go back, for now you will just see a simple about text right here, but we will turn it into the whole about section. So let's start with the JSX part first, and then we'll focus on the animations. Let's give it an ID equal to about, just so we can scroll to it and animate it, as well as a class name equal to min-h-screen and w-screen, so it takes the full height and width. If we do that, you can now see that all of this blank space is our about screen. And for the time being, I will put it to mobile view just so we can see what's happening. Within this div, I'll create another div that'll have a class name equal to relative, margin bottom of 8, margin top of 36, flex dash call, items dash center, and a gap of 5. Within it, I'll render an h2 and give it a class name equal to font dash general, text dash sm, uppercase, and on medium devices, text dash 10 pixels. So now inside of there, we can say welcome to Zentree. There we go. That's looking cool. Right below this h2, we'll render a div with a class name equal to margin top of 5 to divide it a bit from the top, text dash center to center it, text dash 4XL, so it's going to be super large, uppercase, leading dash 0.8, like this, and on medium devices, text dash 6 rem. Within it, we can render a piece of text, such as discover the world's largest shared adventure. There we go. This is looking pretty amazing. But if we go into the finished website, and if you zoom in, you'll notice that the O here and a couple of other letters like the A have that special character design. So we have to wrap them in bold characters. I'll do that with this O right here. So that's going to be B for bold. Same thing here. And we'll do that with the A right here near the end under largest. There we go. This is looking good. And let's also add a break tag after worlds. So we put that in a new line. There we go. For now, it's looking like this, but trust me, soon enough, it will look much different. Below this div, I'll create another div with a class name equal to about dash subtext. They'll render the p tag and say the game of games begins. That sounds exciting. And then we can say your life, now an epic MMORPG. This Zentree game really sounds amazing. I might even give it a try after we code this website out. And I'll leave the link in the description anyway to credit them for such an amazing design and development of this app. Right below it, let's create another p tag. This p tag will say something like Zentree unites every player from countless games and platforms. I think this is going to be good. And now we can see that text right here. Let's go a bit down. So that's going to be 2 divs down and create another div that'll have a class name equal to h-dvh and w-screen. as well as an ID equal to clip. Within it, we can create another div with a class name equal to mask-clip-path. And it's going to have a class name of about image, within which we can render a self-closing image tag with a source of img/about.webp. It's going to have an alt tag of background, as well as a class name equal to absolute, left-0, top-0, size-full, and object-cover. Now you cannot see it just yet, and that's because we have to animate it. So I'll scroll up a bit and use the use GSAP hook. We'll have a function right here, a callback function, and within it, I'll say const clip animation is equal to gsap.timeline. So this is the first time we're creating a timeline, which allows us to more precisely create a trigger, a start, and an end. We're going to work with triggers right here, as you already know. So we can do a scroll trigger, and we're going to trigger it once a user reaches a clip, which is going to be this part of the page here. Once it reaches that part, we can define the start of the trigger, which is going to be center. We can also define the end, which is going to be, this is pretty interesting, so pay attention, plus equal to 800 and center. So it'll trigger 800 pixels after it passes the center. We can also do a scrub of 0.5, and scrub simply refers to how we're moving through the animation on scroll. We can also do a pin to true and pin spacing to true as well. And if you want to learn more about any of these properties, just go to GSAP and maybe search for pin or pin spacing. If you do that and go to the docs of the scroll trigger animation and search for pin or pin spacing, you can immediately see what it does. Now, with that said, let's try to apply this animation by going a bit down and saying clip animation dot to mask clip path. And we're going to give it a width of about 100 VW, a height of about 100 VH, and a border radius of 0. What is this mask clip path? Well, I think we have it right here. See? Mask clip path. So this will actually show that image that I was telling you about. Now, of course, we have to import use GSAP, and we also have to import the GSAP library itself by saying import GSAP from GSAP. And don't forget, we also have to turn on or register the plugin for scrolling. So we need to say import scroll trigger coming from GSAP all, and then we can say GSAP.register plugin of scroll trigger. Now we're back in action, and if we scroll, check this out. We have discovered the world's largest shared adventure, and if I scroll, the image actually does something, like it animates to the bottom. This is pretty cool. Not yet what we want, but we're getting there. And how does it look like on desktop? Oh, it's kind of jumping around, as you can see. We'll definitely fix that. Oh, no, I reloaded and now it's better. So you can see how it goes right here and then it expands. I'm noticing some characters right here, VH. So it means that I didn't properly write the style somewhere. Oh, here it is. Looks like I took it out of the class name. It was supposed to be HDVH W screen. So now it's a bit better. So now you can see how first it looks like this, and then as you scroll down, it actually expands to the full width. Now, even though this is looking great for the About section, we have to do something about this piece of text. It definitely doesn't look like this. And the text itself, in some cases, can be animated. Now, it's not in this section, but later on, we're using similar pieces of text, and we'll be able to animate what it does, as you can see here. So it's better to turn it into a reusable component immediately, so we can then animate it, as you can see here, and reuse it across other sections. So let me collapse this, head over to our working version of the application, which doesn't look that good, and we can create a new component called animated title.jsx, run rafce, and we can import it right here where we have this div. So I'll import the animated title. And for the time being, I will copy this div and put it into the animated title. So far, it might look like the same thing with some extra steps, but trust me, we'll soon turn this into a properly animated title, which we'll be able to reuse across many different sections. So let's do that next. To get started creating our custom animated title, let's actually expand on this div. Let's first make it dynamic and reusable through props. To these props, we can pass the title and the container class. So now you can take this discover the world's largest shared adventure, copy it, and we'll pass it into the animated title as a title string. That's gonna look something like this. And we can do the same thing with the container class by saying container class is equal to margin top of 5 and exclamation mark text dash black and text dash center. Now, if you head into the animated title, instead of rendering the text right here, we can say title.split, and we're gonna split it based on the break tag to create some space. That's gonna look like this. And then we can map over all of these pieces of the title by getting each individual line and the index of that line. For each line, I will return another div, and this div, of course, we have to close it. I'll give it a key equal to index since we're mapping over it, and a class name equal to flex-center, max-w-full, flex-wrap, gap of 2, padding x of 10, and on medium devices, a gap of 3. Within it, we can simply render the line, but I'll also split it by spaces. So I'll say line.split based on spaces like this. And of course, let's make sure to properly close it right here. There we go. Once we split it, we're going to get each individual word. So we can say .map word and the index, we can call it just I, and we're going to map over each word itself by giving it a span with a key equal to I, a class name equal to animated word, and we're going to call a dangerously set inner HTML, where we're going to set the underscore HTML variable, where it's going to be underscore HTML, to be equal to the contents of that word. And we can make this span self-closing. I know this might be a bit weird right now, but you'll see how great it looks when you can animate each word on its own. You can see it right here. So for now, it looks like I didn't properly close all those divs. So I have to end and close right here. There we go, we're good. I will indent this a bit more so we can see it better. And now we should be able to see some kind of a title right here. At least we will when we add a container class to this class name. So let's actually fix these class names by giving it a class name of animated-title. And we can also render a dynamic container class like this. But of course, to do that, we have to wrap it in a template string. So that's going to look something like this. If I do that, we cannot see the title just yet. And now we have to actually animate it. So scroll a bit up and create a new ref. Const container ref is equal to use ref coming from React. And at the start, it'll be set to null. Once we have this ref, we can actually attach it to this container div by saying ref is equal to container ref. And this will now allow us to start animating it. So let's create a new use effect hook, which allows us to perform some actions whenever things on the page change. Specifically in this case, we want to make it happen initially as soon as the page loads, not on any kind of changes, which is why we'll leave the dependency array empty. Within here, we can define a GSAP context to ensure the animations and selectors are scoped to this instance of a component. So let's say const ctx, short for context, is equal to gsap.context. And we can define it within a callback function. And then as the second parameter, we can pass the ref. In this case, it's going to be container ref. Now, we first have to import GSAP from GSAP. So let me say import GSAP from GSAP. There we go. And now we can start creating some animations and timelines of animations within this context by saying const title animation is equal to GSAP.timeline. So we're creating a new timeline with a scroll trigger as before. The trigger will happen once we reach a container ref.current, and it'll start on 100 pixels and the bottom of that container, and it'll end in the center of that container and the bottom of that container when it comes to top and bottom. Finally, we can toggle some actions such as play, none, none, reverse. You can look into these actions, and of course, this is something we can look into by GSAP docs. So if you head over to toggle actions GSAP, scroll trigger, and then search for toggle actions, you can see that it says, if you want an animation only to play once when scrolling forward and never get reset or replayed, then you can set it to once, but you can also set toggle actions to play none, none, none. In this case, we have play none, none, reverse, but it approaches a very similar thing. And there we go here. It says toggle actions control 4 distinct toggle places: on enter, on leave, on enter back, and on leave back in that order. So in this case, we say on enter, play, on leave, none, on enter back, none, but on leave back, reverse the animation. You'll see what cool effect this will give us. With that in mind, let's animate the title now by saying title animation dot to dot animated word. So we're gonna animate to this class by setting the opacity to 1, by setting the transform to translate 3D 0, 0, 0, rotate Y to 0 degree, as well as rotate X to 0 degrees as well. So we're kind of resetting the animation right here. We can also put an ease of power2.in/out and a stagger of 0.02 in between the different words. And finally, since we're within a use effect, at the end, we have to clean that use effect up by creating a new callback function where we say context ctx.revert, which will clean it up on unmounting of this component. Now, if you scroll down, you can see something appearing right here, but it's not really in position. It's not really in place. Same thing if we go here, this isn't really looking good, is it? Let's try to fix it together. If I head over here, I think my rotation X is not getting applied, or the transform for that matter, because I have this comma here. We should just have an empty space in between all of these properties. So if we do that, you can now see discover let's fix that double D right here. I think it's gonna be in the about. There we go, discover the world's largest shared adventure. This is much better, and check this out. If I scroll down, it will slowly start animating. And again, take a look. It's animating as you're barely seeing it. So it's not the goal that you're seeing the white screen while it's animating. Immediately you're here and it appears. It shows up for you, so you don't have to wait at all, but you still see it. And then as we scroll back, it is still here. This is great. So now we have an animated title right here, and then we scroll down and enter a new world. Perfect. With that in mind, you have developed the animated title. So let's go back to the about. And with it, I think the about section is now done. Before we continue with the upcoming sections, I think it's about damn time that we implement the navigation bar. Right now, it's looking a bit empty right here, and we don't have the ability to quickly scroll to another section on the page, which is always welcomed. So let's head back to the app, open up the components folder, and create a new file called navbar.jsx, run rafce, and then import it right here above the hero section by calling a self-closing navbar functional component. You should be able to see it right here at the top, which means that we are ready to start implementing it. Let's get started with implementing our navbar. To do that, I'll put my browser to the left side and my code editor to the right. That way we can better see what's happening here. And I'll also head over to our home and stop the autoplay of the video, just so we don't have to see it repeat every time, and then I'll reload. Great. This is better. We can turn it back on later on. And just so we can see the nav links, because they're gonna be white, for the time being, I will just add a background color to our main, BG Zinc of 600. It's a darkish color that will allow us to see our navbar elements. Great. So with that said, let's get started with creating it. First things first, I'll wrap everything in a div component, and this div will actually later on be animated, so I will immediately create a ref for it by saying const nav container ref is equal to useRef at the start equal to null, and of course we'll have to import it from React by saying useRef. Now we can give it that ref by saying nav container ref, as well as we can start giving it some class names. In this case, let's give it a fixed, because it'll be fixed to the top, inset x of 0, top of 4, z of 50, so it appears above other elements, h of 16 for the height, border dash none, transition dash all, duration of 700 for the animation, and on small devices, inset of x of 6. Now you cannot see it just yet because we have nothing in it, but within there, we can add a header component. This header will have a class name equal to absolute, top dash 1/2. This will give it a top 50%, w full for full width, and minus translate dash y dash 1/2. Within it, we can develop a nav element. This nav will have a class name equal to flex, size dash full, items dash center, justify dash between, so they show on the left and the right side, and a padding of 4. And within it, we can start creating the left side of our navbar, where we're going to have our logo and the product button. So let's create a div with a class name of flex, items dash center, and a gap of 7. And right within it, I'll create an image with a source equal to /img /logo.png with an alt tag of logo and a class name of w10. And now we can see the little logo on the top left. Right below it, we can also render a button coming from our reusable components. It'll be a self-closing button component to which we can pass a couple of props, such as the ID of a product button, a title equal to products, right icon, in this case will be TI location arrow, so it can be a self-closing component. There we go. And we can also pass some container classes, such as container class is equal to BG blue of 50. That's gonna change its color. Next, we can do on medium devices flex, so it nicely looks like this. Typically, it's gonna be hidden, items dash center, justify dash center, and a gap of 1 in between the elements. And this is gonna make it look very nice. Now we're moving to the right side of the navbar, so below this div, where we're gonna have another div for the navigation links and the audio button. Yep, we'll be able to play music within our page. We can give this div a class name of flex, h-full, and items-center. And within it, we can create another div. And this div will typically be hidden on smaller devices. So we can give it a class name of hidden, but on medium devices, it'll be block, meaning visible, on medium and larger. Within it, we can map over our nav items. What you could do is just declare an array of different objects with title, home, link, but you can see that this can start getting messy very soon. So instead of doing that, we can define our nav items just at the top by saying const nav items is equal to, and then here you can have home, about, services, products, and so on. But in the case of our great gaming application, we can have something like Nexus, or we can have Volt, or we can have Prologue. And finally, we have the about, as well as the contact. These are some different items. Again, feel free to change them as you will. Now, if we go down, we can say nav items dot map, where we map over each individual item, and we can automatically return an anchor tag for each one. Make sure to put just a regular parenthesis here and not a curly brace, because we're doing an automatic return. Now, within this anchor tag, we can simply render an item. If you do that, you can see those different items appear right here. And on small devices, they completely disappear. But on medium, we can see them. Now let's style this anchor tag by giving it a class name of navhoverbtn, just like so. And now, as you hover it, we have this little effect happening right here. If you want to check this out in action, you can search it and then check it out within index.css. Basically, we're applying a margin inline start of 2.5 rem, so it basically has enough space in between other elements. We're changing the text to small, to uppercase, to changing the text color, and then what we're doing is applying the border bottom, and then we're animating it by a couple of pixels and changing its color. So if you check this out, you can see that this border animates. I think I found this little animation in the web, and then I just put it here. You can find many of these animations on the web. You don't necessarily have to code everything. Sometimes it's good not to reinvent the wheel and basically grab these cool little animations whenever you can. With that in mind, we also need to give each anchor tag a key. In this case, it'll be equal to item because each item is different. And finally, an href too. Href will point to hash item.toLowerCase, like this. So if you click Nexus, it'll point to Nexus, Volt, Prolog, and so on. You can see About already works. It points us to the About section. This is great. Now, I think I can remove the background color from the app because it's no longer needed. There we go. So if I go here and click About, it nicely scrolls to About. Now, with that in mind, we can go back to the nav and we can scroll a bit down below this div that's wrapping the navigation items, but still within this div. And there, we can create a button that allows us to play the audio. Yep, you will be able to play some music, believe it or not. So I'll create a new button. This time we'll just use a regular button. And I'll give it a class name equal to margin left of 10 to divide it a bit from the nav items, flex items-center, and a space x of 0.5 to just give it a bit of extra space. Now we need to create a new function that will allow us to play music. So let's create it by saying const toggle audio indicator, and that's going to be equal to an arrow function. And we can also create a new ref that will allow us to attach audio to this element by saying const audio element ref is equal to useRef, and at the start set to null. Make sure to call it audio element ref. There we go. Now, if I scroll down to this button, we can give it an onClick equal to toggle audio indicator. And within it, I will render the audio element. I'll give it a ref equal to audio element ref, a class name of hidden typically, with a source equal to /audio/loop.mp3. So this is an mp3 file that I provided for you in the source. And then we can give it a loop property, which will loop the audio once it finishes playing. And now this is a pretty cool feature. While it is playing, we also want to show some audio lines move up and down to indicate that the audio is playing and that we can stop it. So you can achieve that by mapping over 1, 2, 3, 4. These are just numbers, but they will act as our line bars. And then we can say .map over each individual bar. And for each bar, we will return a div. This div will have a key equal to bar, and it'll also have a class name equal to indicator-line. And then we can also give it another class, which is going to be dynamic. So you have to turn this into a template string. And we'll have to check whether the audio is playing. So for that, we can create a new use state at the top by saying const is audio playing, set is audio playing, and that's going to be equal to the use state element at the start set to false. Of course, we have to import the use state right here from React. Once you do that, based on this is audio playing, we can also define another use state, and that'll be is indicator active. So we can say is indicator active and set is indicator active at the start set to false. So now if we scroll down, right here, I can check if is indicator active, then we will apply an active class, else we will apply just an empty string. Now you cannot see it yet as we're not yet playing music, but we'll do that soon. And we can also give this div, which is by the way a self-closing div because we won't put anything in it, it's just going to be a line. We can give it a style property where we can define an animation delay and say the delay will be dependent on the bar we're on. So if we're in the first bar, we want to multiply that by 0.1 seconds. For the second bar, it's going to be 0.2 seconds and so on. Hopefully this makes sense. You'll see it in action very, very soon. And I think this is a good chance to put our editor to the left side and the browser to the right so we can see what's happening. Now we can scroll up and we can implement the logic for playing the music. We have all the states and all the necessary refs and functions to be able to play it. First things first, in the toggle audio indicator, I will set is audio playing to be equal to a previous version of that state, and we're just going to toggle it off or on. So if previously it has been set to true, now we're going to set it to false. And I want to do the same thing with is indicator active. So set is indicator active is going to be the previous version of that specific state. Now that we have that, we can create a use effect. As you know, to use effect, you have to pass a callback function and a dependency array. And we want to recall it every time that the is audio playing variable changes. So let's say if is audio playing is true, then we can set the audio element ref dot current dot play. And else, if it's not true, we can set it to pause. Great. But now, how can we actually toggle the music on? Like, there's no button that we see. Well, if you scroll down right here, you can see that we are hiding the audio field. And typically we have to hide it because it looks very bad. We don't want that MP3 bar to show right here. We just want some very nice song indicators. So to achieve that, we can actually close the audio property right here and then show these indicators after the audio prop. So they're completely divided. First we have this, and then we have the indicators, which act as the button to play it. Now on the top right, you should be able to see these 4 different line indicators. I think I can zoom it in a bit more. There we go. So you can see it right here. And now if you click it, they should start playing the music. There we go. I can hear it in my headphones. The recording is not picking it up, which is totally fine, but it should start playing for you as well. We have some very uplifting music right here. And if you click it, it stops. I just found a copyright-free music which I thought would work very well. But of course, you can put any kind of MP3 right here that you want in public audio loop.mp3. That's it. Super simple. And then the music plays, and these 4 different lines jump around very nicely. Beautiful. So with that in mind, I'll zoom out. I'll check how it looks on mobile. Currently, we're hiding all the elements and we're just letting the users enjoy the actual website on mobile. But on desktop, we have a top nav. But now what's happening if I scroll down? But as you can notice, some of our background sections are completely white, which means that the elements get lost right here, which is exactly why we'll actually turn it into a black rectangle that appears when you scroll. Basically what we'll do is this. If you scroll down, the navbar is going to be hidden, but then let's say you're scrolling, you're enjoying the website, right? But then you start scrolling back. That typically means that the user is lost and that he's trying to find something. When you start scrolling back, the navbar will slowly appear in its black form, and then it will allow you to go to whatever section you want to go to. Great. So let's implement that animation, allowing you to visit different sections of the site. To implement that effect, where we figure out when we want to bring the navbar back, when the user scrolls back, we'll have to know the scroll position of the user. And for that, I'll use the React.js library, which has more than 41,000 stars on GitHub. It is super simple to install. npmi React.js. So I'll simply add it to my second terminal. And once you do that, we can import something out of it. And that something will be import use window scroll coming from React.js. Next, we can actually get the Y property of the user's current scroll. And we can do that by saying const destructure the Y and rename it to current scroll Y and make it equal to the use window scroll hook. Once we have that, we can define a new use effect that's going to change depending on the current scroll Y, but we also have to keep track of the last scroll Y, right? This is pretty cool. So let's actually create a new use state snippet and call it last scroll Y. This will allow us to know when a user starts going back. And at the start, it'll be set to 0. And we can also create another state. So use state snippet, and it's going to be called is nav visible because we have to toggle the visibility of the nav on or off. And at the start, it'll be set to true. I'll expand this just a bit so we can see it a bit better. And I'll start implementing this use effect, where at the start, we want to check if the current scroll Y position is equal to the 0, which it most likely is if we're at the top. That is the topmost position, and there we want to show the navbar without the floating bar element. What is the floating bar? Well, the dark screen. Let me show you. If I go here, we have that dark screen that allows you to see the white text elements on the white background. But at the top, we completely remove it because the elements are still visible as we have this video playing right here. So here, we can set is nav visible to true, but we can say the nav container ref dot current dot class list dot remove floating dash nav. Pretty cool, right? We can remove a specific class based on a position of the scroll. Very useful. Now, we can also have an else if and check if the current scroll Y is greater than the last scroll Y, which means that the user is just scrolling down, okay? So they're not scrolling up, which means they're lost. In this case, we can completely hide the navigation bar and we can add the floating nav class. Else if the current scroll Y is lower than the last scroll Y, in that case, we want to set is nav visible to true, and we also want to add the floating nav. So not remove, rather add. And how are we going to keep track of the last scroll? Well, we're going to set it right here. Set last scroll Y is equal to the current scroll Y. Finally, we can apply a slight GSAP animation by saying use effect, and it's going to change whenever the navbar visibility changes. So if is nav visible, in that case, we can call the GSAP, which of course we have to import from the top by saying import GSAP from GSAP. And then we can say GSAP.to. So we want to animate to nav container ref, and we want to give it specific variables of Y. If is nav visible, then we're going to set it to 0, else we're going to set it to -100. You'll see why soon. Then same thing for opacity. If is nav visible is true, then it can be set to 1, else it'll be set to 0, and we can set the duration to something like 0.2. Now, if you save this, you can see that exactly what I said was true. Here, we only see the text elements. If you start scrolling down, you can start seeing the dark element right here. But at some point, it should actually disappear, right? And then if you start scrolling up, it should appear. But for us, it is always visible, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You can keep it like this, but I prefer to hide it just so we can enjoy the full screen assets of this beautifully designed website. So let's see why we're not hiding it. I think that's because we're not recalling this use effect whenever the last scroll position changes. So it cannot properly decide when the last is lower than the current. So if I add it right here, we can see it. It appears. Oh, no, that didn't do it. That makes me think that this use effect is to blame. We're properly changing the Y position and the opacity. Oh, but here too, we have to say nav container ref dot current to properly point to that element. If you do that, you notice it gets hidden. It's nowhere to be seen, but as we start scrolling up, it appears back, and then it gets to its first initial position. This is working wonderfully well. It is such a great looking navbar with those added additional functionalities of hiding it, showing it, And then even it has multiple shown positions, such as this initial one where it's very minimal. And then we have this one where it appears, if we scroll up, where you can very clearly see different elements where you want to go. And then not to mention that we have the ability to play the music. That's great. And I like that the music is not actually playing at the start. You can actually maybe ask the user if you want to turn it on at the start with some kind of an alert or something. Feel free to implement that functionality because sometimes it might be easy to just miss this button at the top right. But with that said, the navigation bar has been implemented, which means that we're ready to implement a section below this one. And that's going to be this dark section where we're going to have some sort of a bento grid with these different animated elements, which look amazing. So let me actually collapse the browser to the right side. There we go. It looks amazing. Can't wait to start implementing this. I will close all of the currently open files and I'll create another component called features right here below the source, run RAFCE, and then render those features right here below the about. If you do that and go back to the website, you'll notice that now it says features right here at the bottom, which means that we are ready to start developing it. I think this is maybe the second most interesting section after the hero, of course, even though the navbar was pretty cool, you gotta admit. So take a bit of a pause and we can continue right away. To get started working on the features section, let's first turn it into just that, a section. Section is an HTML5 semantic div, which denotes that something new is happening in this part of the screen. Next, we can give it a class name equal to bg-black and padding bottom of 52. If you do that, we get this nice black rectangle. Right below it, let's render a div, and that div will have a class name of container, margin X of auto, padding X of 3, and on medium devices, padding X of 10. Within it, let's create another div just used for some positioning with a class name equal to padding X of 5 for horizontal padding and padding Y of 32 for vertical padding. Within it, we can create a new p tag, and this p tag can say into the metagame layer. You cannot see it just yet as it is dark, but we can now style it by giving it a class name of font-circular-web, text-lg, and text-blue 50, which is basically a white variant. Below this p tag, we can create another p tag that can say a bit of a longer text, maybe something like immerse yourself in a rich and ever-expanding universe where a vibrant array of products converge into an interconnected overlay experience on your world. It's a long one, I know. You don't have to type it exactly like this one. You can just type any kind of a longer piece of text so we can see it on the screen. You could also come to the finish site right here and then copy it from there. I think that's going to be the easiest way to do it. I'll link it somewhere below. We can then give it a class name equal to max-w-md, font-circular-web, text-lg, and text-blue 50 with an opacity of 50. And now we have this piece of text right here. Let's go below this p tag and below one more div to create another div. This will be the start of our bento grid. Yep, this part right here. So let's give this div a class name equal to border-hsla. If you search for this, you'll see that it simply applies a border white property, which you can immediately see right here. And then we're going to also give it a relative positioning with a margin bottom of 7, height of 96, which is going to basically turn it into its own section, W of full, overflow of hidden, so we don't have that ugly scroll, rounded-MD to round up the corners, and on medium devices, H of 65 VH. Within it, we want to render a bento card. Now, as you know, we're going to have a couple of these bento cards, like this one, this one, this one. They're all different bento cards. So instead of simply recreating a card from scratch every time, what do you say that we develop a bento card reusable component? That's going to be much, much better. So let's render the first bento card right here by calling it like this, bento card, as a self-closing component. And to it, we can pass a couple of props, such as a source in terms of which video will it play. So it can be videos, feature-1.mp4. We can also pass a title, which is going to be an empty React fragment, inside of which we can say radiant, like this. But in this case, we can make the N bolded, which is going to look something like this. You're already used to doing that, right? Perfect. And alongside the title, we can also give it a description. And this description can maybe be copied from this finished website. I'll copy this description from here by saying a cross-platform metagame app, turning your activities across Web 2 and Web 3 games into a rewarding adventure. Finally, some of these features will be coming soon. So if it is coming soon, we can apply this is coming soon prop. By default, if you don't provide an equal sign and then value, it'll be set to true automatically. So this is coming soon is equal to true. Now that we have this card, let's actually create it above this section. And why are we creating it above and not in a custom component? Because this is the only place where we'll use it. So I'll say const bento card is equal to, and I'm going to accept all of those props, such as a source, title, description, is coming soon. And we can open up a new functional component. For now, I will simply return a div, and I will render the title. If I do that and come back, you should be able to see, well, something that looks like this bento card, but there we go, it is hidden because the text is actually dark on the dark background. We actually have to turn it to white. So let's continue styling this bento grid by giving this div a class name equal to relative and size-full. Within it, we can immediately play the video by saying video, and it'll be a self-closing component. To it, we can pass a source equal to source. We can also pass loop. We can make it muted because we don't need the sound. We can make it autoplay, and we can give it a class name equal to absolute, left-0, top-0, size-full, object-cover, and object-center. If you do this, you can see this beautiful video playing right here in between the card. And believe it or not, when you're seeing these highly animated websites, in many cases, they just have very good video assets. So basically, web development and web design are sometimes a combination of art with these 3D artists or illustration artists that produce for you these assets that you can then put onto your websites. It's not necessary, but it sure as hell helps. Below this video, let's create a div, and that div will have a class name equal to relative, z of 10 to appear above the video, flex, size-full, flex-call, justify-between, padding of 5, and text-blue of 50. And within it, I will render an empty div, within which I'll put an h1, which will then render the title. So we no longer need this fake title right here. And now we can actually style this h1 by giving it a class name of bento-title. There we go, that's a bit better. And we can give it a special-font. So now it applies that N to it right here. Beautiful. Finally, some cards will not have a description and some will. So if a description exists, only then do we render a p tag that renders the description. Let's style it by giving it a class name of margin top of 3 to divide it from the title, max-w of 64. We can give it a text extra small, and on medium devices, text-base. There we go. So this is now looking like a real card. And some of these cards will have this is coming soon button. But considering that most of these features are coming soon, and we have a card right here that says more coming soon, I don't actually think we'll need it. So for now, I will just remove the is coming soon prop, and I'll also remove it from here when we're passing it to it. This is already looking good enough for me. Not even good enough, it's looking amazing. Now you can see how on the final application, there is some additional space on the left and on the right. So the card is more in the middle, whereas here it seems like almost it's touching the corners. Well, I think I made a small mistake right here. I closed this div right here too soon. So actually, I should have closed it here after the second paragraph, which is going to push it a bit up. And then the other div can be closed all the way at the bottom, right here. There we go. So now this is going to make it look just a bit better. It's going to give it some more breathing room. Now we can go below this first bento card and below this div as well. And we can create another div. This div will have a class name equal to grid h-135 vertical height, VH, with a grid of calls to and grid-rows-3 with a gap of 7 in between the elements of that grid. This will allow us to create a very interesting UI, such as if you go on the finished website, it's going to look something like this, where we have one big one on the left and two smaller ones on the right. Now, within this div, we'll create another div, and that div will have a class name equal to bento-tilt_1 row-span-1 on medium devices call-span-1 and on medium devices row-span-2. So now we're working on dynamic positioning dependent on different screen sizes. And within it, we can render another bento card because now it's going to be super simple. The only thing we have to do is pass the right props, such as a source of videos feature-2.mp4, and immediately we can see this video playing. We can also give it a title. In this case, it'll be equal to an empty React fragment, within which we can put a test of Sigma. I think that's what they have on the final website. There we go, Sigma. And then we can copy this description text as well by saying description and make it equal to this thing right here. It looks like the M is a special character in this case. So I will just wrap the M in a bold tag to give it that special effect. There we go. That's much better. And you'll notice that on desktop devices, this will actually take 2 rows, which is perfect. And then as you collapse it, notice this, it's going to drop to a single column and a single row for that matter. That's because of this grid that we implemented. Now we can go below this div and create another div that'll have a class name equal to bento-tilt_1 row-span-1 ms of 32. And this ms is not something that we often used, but basically it applies a margin inline start of about 128 pixels. On medium devices, call-span-1, and on medium devices, there's going to be no inline start, 0. So you can see that this will actually push it a bit to the right to create this interesting visual effect, but it's going to be even more apparent once we add the bento grid within it. So let's render another bento card by indenting it properly and giving it a source equal to videos/feature-3.mp4. There we go. This is a pretty cool one, minimalistic yet effective. I'll give it a title equal to, again, I'll make it a React fragment, and within it, we can say something like Nexus, with the E this time being the special letter. So let me render E within the bold tags. Nexus, there we go. Pretty cool. We can also give it a description by copying it from the finished site. It's going to look like this. So if I go back and give it a description, it is looking great. This text is a bit harder to read sometimes. We can definitely tweak that later on, or apply some kind of a background over the text so it's a bit easier to consume. That is one thing that you have to keep in mind with these highly animated websites, and that is just overall usability. You don't want to make everything so flashy that it's hard to get to the gist or to the primary point of your website. The website is only there to serve a specific purpose, like getting the user to play the game or getting the user to purchase a product. If you flash your game or flash your product too much to the user, they're going to be lost and they're not going to do what they came up here to do. Instead, they're just going to simply start sharing this website to all of their friends because how cool it is, but nobody will be playing the game as all of them will be just watching the website. With that in mind, we can duplicate this entire div with the bento card and I'll just paste it right here below because we're going to implement something very similar for the next card. We're going to have the same thing, bento tilt 1, but I'll remove the rest of the classes and I'll add ME of 14, which is actually going to apply a margin inline end this time. On medium devices, call-span-1, and on medium devices, ME of 0, which is going to push it at the start. Bento grid will render the feature for videos, and it's going to say something like Azul, which is the name of, I guess, one of the games that they have, with the U being a special character. So I'll put it within the bold characters, like this. Perfect. We can also copy its text right here and modify it. And with that, we can move to the two last cards, which are not really cards, they're just little elements. One that says more coming soon, and another one which plays the inline video. So we can do it by going below the card and below one more div, and we'll create a final div with a class name of bento-tilt_2. That'll render another div inside of it with a class name equal to flex, size-full, flex-call, justify-between, bg violet, 300, and a padding of 5. There we go. So now we're creating this card right here. It's going to have an H1 right inside of it. That's going to say something like more coming soon. And you can choose to make whatever characters you want special. Like, let's go with the O right here. I'll make it bold. And we can go with some other characters. Maybe M in the middle. That's going to be bolded as well. And maybe one of the O's at the end, coming soon. There we go. If I do that and save, we have to properly close all the bold tags. I think this one is wrong. There we go. And now we can see more coming soon, which looks awful. But once you apply a class name to it, equal to bento-title, and then apply a special font, now you can see the differences. And max-w of 64, as well as text-black. If you zoom it in or if you get close to it, you can start noticing how cool these custom characters look like. Right below this H1, we can have a TI location arrow to which we can pass a class name of M of 5 for margin, scale of a number 5, and self end, so it can align itself to the end. Looking good. Now we can go 2 divs down and we can create that additional card with a class name equal to bento-tilt_2 that'll render a video with a source equal to videos feature-5.mp4. It'll loop, it'll be muted, it'll autoplay, and it'll have a class name of size-full, object-cover, and object-center. There we go, that's more like it. So now this is looking great. And just by itself, this section is already looking amazing, especially given how we get into it. Like, we are on the light section, we see this image, and we don't think anything of it. But then we start diving into that image, which is pretty cool. We get turned into a new dark world where we can see this bento grid right here. Already it is looking amazing with these mini videos playing within each one. Of course, fully mobile responsive, but we're gonna take it even a step further by adding a tilt effect to these cards. Check this out. If I move this cursor over the card, it's gonna tilt as if I'm hovering over it in different places. Same thing for this one too. They're kind of like interactable. You almost feel like you can take it in your hand, which is a perfect effect for collectible card games, but it looks great here as well. So let me show you how you can implement it. I'll go back to the mobile mode. You'll see how great it looks like on mobile as well. And I'll create a new component right here at the top above the bento card, and I'll call it bento tilt. It's gonna take in the children, which we wanna tilt, and it's gonna take in a class name, which by default will be set to an empty string. Finally, we can return the tilt. So for now, let's simply return a div, and this div will render the children. So we don't want to do anything yet. We just want to show the cards themselves, and then later on we'll add additional functionalities here. So what I want to do now is replace all these divs that wrap the bento cards with a bento tilt component, like this. This is the first time with these, bento tilt. There we go. Then we have another one which wraps the card, bento tilt. Then we have another one, bento tilt. We have another one right here, bento tilt. And finally, we have this one, bento tilt 2. And the last one is the bento tilt for the video. Now, this completely broke the view because we lost all of the class names we're passing to it. So to fix it, we just have to pass the class names to the div by saying class name is equal to class name. And everything is back to where we were, but now we can start implementing the tilt itself. Let's do it by creating a new use state field, which is going to be called transform style. And set transform style at the start set to an empty string. We also need a ref to be able to move those elements around. So I'll say const item ref is equal to use ref coming from React. We'll also have a function const handle mouse move, which will give us the move event like this, and it'll be executed once we move our mouse on top of that element. And we have to have the same thing for handle mouse leave, which will happen once we leave the card, which is when we want to set the transform style back to an empty string. Now that we have all of these elements, we can pass it to this div, such as a ref equal to item ref. We can pass the on mouse move to be equal to the on mouse move function we created. We can also pass the on mouse leave, which is going to be equal to the handle mouse leave. And I should have done the same thing here, handle mouse move, on mouse move. That's generally a good practice to have the handler attached to the specific on event functionality. So on mouse move, you handle the mouse move. And finally, we can pass it a style, which is going to be equal to transform is going to be set to the transform style, which is at the start set to nothing, an empty string. So now if I hover over it, nothing is happening. But check this out. If I go into the handle mouse move, I want to figure out which card we're interacting with. So if there is no card, so if no item ref.current, I'll just exit the function and not change anything. But if we are modifying something, I can then set this new transform style to be equal to a new style. Like maybe I can apply whatever Copilot is assisting with me here. Okay, this is interesting. So by itself, it applied some kind of a tilt right here, but it doesn't work very well. But you get the point. Once we go into the card, we can play with it like this. I will not take this. Rather, I'll teach you how to create a much better tilt on your own. And keep in mind, there are some packages that do this. So you could technically go to npm and find a package that does it for you. But in this case, I'll teach you how to do it from scratch. First, we want to get the properties of the position of the card by saying const destructuring the left, the top, the width, and the height by saying equal to item ref.current .get bounding client rect. How does this work? Well, it works because it finds the current reference to the element we're clicking, and then it gets us its positions. Once we have the positions, we want to get the relative x and relative y properties. I mean, the card relative to the cursor, right? So we can say event.clientx, which is the position of the cursor, minus left divided by the width. So this is going to give us a relative position of our mouse to the position of the card. And we can repeat the same thing for the y positions. I call the event in this case just the e, so we can switch it over to e. And we want to do the same thing with the tilt. So now that we have the relative difference between our mouse cursor and the card itself, we can say const tilt x is equal to relative y minus 0.5 times 5. I found this value to work the best. And you can do the same for the tilt y by setting it to relative x minus 0.5 times minus 5. I'll show you how we can switch those values later on. But for now, we can set this new transformation by saying const new transform is equal to a string where we take in the perspective of 700 pixels, and then we rotate the x position. I have to turn off this autocomplete because it's not doing me any favors. Okay, I think I at least decreased the number of suggestions being given. So on the rotate X, we want to actually set it to be equal to the dynamic property of tilt X, and then give it deg, as in degrees. Of course, we need to turn this into a dynamic template string for these degrees to be counted, which is going to look something like this. Perspective is 700. Rotate X is set to tilt X degrees. And then I think you can guess it. We can then set the rotate Y to be set to tilt Y degrees. And we can also change the scale of the card a bit to allow us to rotate it. If we set it to 111, it's going to be the same, but we can maybe decrease it to 0.95 to make it a bit smaller to allow us to move it around a bit. And we can set the transform style to be equal to new transform. If I save this and reload, nothing is happening just yet. And I think that's because I missed the closing parenthesis right here on rotate X degrees. If I add it, now this is considered a real transformation and it'll actually be applied. So now we can see it moves. If you want to increase it, we can change this maybe over to 10 times, which will make it much more pronounced. Or maybe we could go with something like 50. And now we can see that it really moves a lot, but this is starting to look a bit trippy. So I prefer to keep it at a lower level at like 5. There we go, just little and subtle. And we also don't have to decrease the size that much. We can maybe just decrease it a bit by setting it to 98 maybe, but still give us a bit of space to move it around. Like if we reduce the size of it once we enter it, it feels like we can do something. You see that? There we go. And then we can start moving it around to explore the screen. This is looking great. And with that, we have added those hover animations and tilt animations to those cards. And of course, this is looking so much better on a larger screen because you have so much more space to actually move it around. This effect is actually designed for larger screens because if you go all the way to this corner, the card will be very tilted, as you can see. But on mobile, you cannot actually move around within each card a lot, so you don't have a lot of tilt. What you could do is play a bit with those values, and then if we're on mobile, you could then increase the tilt amounts. But for now, I am more than happy with this. And with that, we came to the end of the feature section, one of the very exciting sections of this project. I mean, I know that I keep saying that for every single one, including the Navbar, but that's just because I'm so excited for this project and all of these sections are indeed very cool. Now for the next section, we're gonna focus on this one right here, where we have this title, which you might already remember from before. It is the animated title we have created. And then we have this card that you can move around a bit and explore inside of the realm. Again, the whole idea of this site is to go inside of different worlds, portals, and realms and explore them with your mouse. So let's do that next. The story of a hidden realm. The story is exactly the next section we'll implement. So let's go back to our application, head over to the components folder and create a new file called story.jsx. Run rafce, import it right below the features, and let's head into it to start implementing it. I'll collapse the browser, and damn is it looking good here as well. And let's turn it into its own section with an ID of story, a class name equal to min-h-dvh, w-screen, bg black, and text-blue of 50. There we go, that's better. Let's also within it render another div that'll have a class name equal to flex, a size of full, flex-call so the elements appear one below another, items-center to center it, padding y of 10, and padding bottom of 24. Within it, we can render a p tag that'll say the multiversal IP world, whatever that means. And we can give it a class name set to font-general, text-small, uppercase, and on medium devices, text-10 pixels, like this. That's gonna look something like this, and within it, we can start creating the animated title. So let's go below the P, and let's create a div that's gonna have a class name of relative with a size-full, and right within it, I'll create an animated title to which we can now pass a title equal to the story of a hidden realm. There we go. That looks amazing. But let's also make some of these characters bolded, like the O in the story, just like this. Let's also add a break after the of, and let's make the M right here bolded as well. And we can also give it a section ID of hash story, so we can scroll to it, and a container class equal to margin top of 5 to divide it a bit from the rest, a pointer dash events dash none, so we cannot interact with it, mix blend difference, this is to blend it with the image that's going to come below it, relative, and a z of 10. Now, as you scroll, it simply says the story, but if you reload, it'll say the story of a hidden realm, and it will very nicely animate as you scroll through it. Now, just below it, still within the same div, we can render the container for the image that will appear right here. So it'll have a class name equal to story-img-container. And we'll have another div right here that'll have a class name of story-img-mask. And finally, the last div that'll have a class name equal to story-img-content. And within it, we can put the actual image. This image will have a source equal to /image/entrance.webp. If I save it, you can see it right here. It has been pre-cut to properly fit the screen right here. I'll also give it an alt tag equal to entrance and a class name equal to object-contain. But now, of course, we have to animate it on hover. So for that reason, I'll give it a ref equal to frame ref. And I'll create that frame ref right here at the top by saying const frame ref is equal to use ref coming from React at the start, set to, of course, a string of null. We can also define a new function, const handle mouse leave, which is going to be a function that's going to handle the event once the mouse leaves, but in our case also enters into this image, because on mouse leave, we're going to call the handle mouse leave, but we're going to do the same thing on mouse up and mouse enter. So let's say on mouse up is equal to handle mouse leave, and the same things goes for on mouse enter. We'll also call it the handle mouse leave. The only one that will be different is going to be on mouse move. So while we're moving, we can actually implement the handle mouse move functionality. So let's create that function right here at the top, right below the handle mouse leave, const handle mouse move. And the effect we're trying to achieve is something like this, similar to the tilt of the card that we had before, but a bit different because it moves a bit less on this side and a bit more on this side, and it also goes over the text. It'll be very, very similar to what we have implemented in our bento cards once we move them, but with just slight differences. So let's implement the handle mouse move first. First, we want to destructure the client X position and the client Y position from the event, meaning our mouse. Then we can get the element by saying frameref.current. That is the element we're hovering over. Then if we don't have an element, so if no element, we're going to simply exit out of the function. But if we do have it, we'll try to get its rectangular properties by saying element.getBoundingClientRect, and then we can extract the X position and the Y position by saying const X is client X minus rect left, and Y position is client Y minus rect top. We're doing that to calculate the center of the image by saying const center X is equal to rect.width divided by 2, and center Y is rect.height divided by 2 as well. Finally, we can calculate the rotation values based on the mouse position relative to the center by saying const rotate X is equal to Y minus center Y divided by center Y times, and then you can put any kind of a magnifier, like -10 in this case. And we can do the same thing for rotate x. That's going to be x position minus center x divided by center x times 10. Finally, we can use GSAP to animate it by saying GSAP.to. Of course, you want to import GSAP from the top by saying import GSAP from GSAP. And then you can say GSAP.to. We want to pass it the element in this case and pass the properties, such as duration is going to be set to 0.3. And then we want to pass the rotate x property set to rotate x, rotate y property set to rotate y. Also the transform perspective property set to 500, which is going to give us a 3D effect. And finally, the ease, which is going to be power1 dot in out. If I do that, we get this beautiful effect, like we're moving within a 3D realm. And you can also notice that it goes right here below the text. Well, of course, we'll have to change the text as it interacts with this image. Now, if we leave the element, we want to reset the positioning, which we can do right here on handle mouse leave. So I'll say GSAP.to, and I'll paste it here. We also need to get the element from the frameref.current. And instead of setting it to new rotation values, I'll simply set the rotate x as well as rotate y properties to 0 and remove the transform perspective. That's it. So now if you enter, we're there, we can move it. You exit, it gets back to normal. Great. Now notice how we have these very pointy corners in our case that then move, which doesn't look that good. But in the final website, it's looking much more organic. It seems more like a card than like a rectangle. We can achieve those rounded corners by using an SVG filter. Within components, you can create a new file called rounded corners.jsx. You can run rafce, and within it, you will paste an SVG that I will give to you. You can find it in the description of the code repository of this video. Here, we're applying the invisible to the corners of this element. Don't worry, I didn't write this code by myself. I just found it on the internet. So now we can add it right here 2 divs down below the image, and I'll call it rounded corners and just call it like this. If you do that, you can notice that now the corners are going to be completely rounded. This is a very cool 3D effect. It feels like we're in there. Now, when it comes to this text, we want to mix it with the image. And right now it's not getting mixed. It is just white. Here, we're applying a mix blend difference, and I think I misspelled the difference right here. So if I spell it properly and go back, you can see that now this makes it even better because you can properly read the text, given that it's completely white on the black background, giving you maximum contrast, but it's also contrasting the image so you can still see it. And this even adds to the effect that we're trying to make. Great. Now we can go a bit below right here and add this piece of text and a button. We can do that by heading below these rounded corners and going 2 divs down. So we're almost at the last div. I'll create another div that'll have a class name equal to minus margin top of 80, flex, w-full, justify-center, on medium devices, minus margin top of 64, on medium devices, ME of 44, and on medium devices, justify-end. We're just creating a position for where this element will appear. Next, we can render another div right within it that will act as the container for the text. That'll have a class name of flex, h-full, w-fit, flex-call, items-center, and on medium devices, items-start. And there we can render a piece of text that's going to be a paragraph. I can copy the text from the final code. Oh, I cannot get to it because of the image. It's actually below the image. But if I start a bit down, I can get to it. There we go. And I will paste it right here and remove what we don't need. That's going to be where realms converge, lies Zentry. Oh, that sounds exciting. So now if we go back, we can style it further by giving this p tag a class name of margin top of 3, max dash W of small, text dash center, font dash circular dash web, text dash violet 50, and on medium devices, text dash start. There we go. That's more like it. And below it, we can render a button, the button that we have already created. That's a reusable button component that'll have an ID of realm button, a title of discover prologue, and a container class equal to margin top of 5. There we go. We have our button right here. Now we're almost done with this section, but it seems to me that it's not exactly the same as what we have here. Here it has a bit more rounded corners even on the right side, whereas ours right now is kind of going all the way out right here. It's jumping out. So let's see where we messed up some styles. Right here where we had the image. I think it's just right here where I said story image content instead of content. If I fix this, the right styles will be applied, and this will look so much better, providing more space for this text right here to come. And of course, we must not forget that this is completely tablet as well as mobile responsive. On mobile, we have this effect right here, as we don't want it to go over the text, and then we nicely show the subtitle in the center. But again, even on tablet devices, we have this cool effect here, and on all sizes in between. With that in mind, the next section we'll implement is this one right here. It looks great even on mobile, where the image jumps across different sections. It's a contact us section where we have a call to action button, and right below it, we have the footer. So let me head back over to the app and create another section called contact.jsx, run array_of_ce. And you know what? I'll immediately do the footer as well by creating a footer.jsx, running array_of_ce. And now we can add the contact as well as the footer right here to the bottom, and they should immediately appear on the page. If we do that, go back, you can see the contact and the footer, which means that we are ready to start implementing it. Great job coming this far into this video. The last two sections are definitely a bit simpler than the previous ones, so you won't have any problems coming to the end of this amazing build, and soon enough, you'll be able to deploy it. To get started with implementing the contact section, let's first give this div an ID of contact so we can easily scroll to it from the navigation bar. And let's also give it a class name equal to margin Y of 20 to give it some space, min-h of 96 to give it much more space, as well as a W screen for full width, and a padding X of 10 to create some space on the left and right sides. Let's also create another div right within it with a class name of relative, rounded-lg, bg black, and a padding way of 24 with text blue of 50, and on small devices, overflow of hidden. There we go. Now we have this inner dark rectangle. Let's have another div inside of here, inside of which we'll have images. So I'll give it a class name of absolute, minus left dash 20, top 0. Typically it'll be hidden with a full height, W of 72, overflow of hidden, but on small devices it'll be block, meaning we'll show it, and on large devices we're gonna do a left of 20, and on large devices a W of 96. This is to make it responsive. Finally, within it, we can render an image. Specifically, it'll be a div that'll have a class name equal to contact-clip-path-1, and within it, we can render an image with a source equal to image contact-1.webp. Now, we cannot yet see it here, but if we expand, you'll be able to see this image, which will make more sense on the final version of the application. We're now creating these right here. On mobile, only the big one will keep showing. Now, we actually have to create another image clip. So what I'll do is I'll copy this part right here and turn it into a reusable component called image clip box, which is going to be a function with an immediate return that's going to return the same div, but we will actually destructure the source and the clip class. So now when we call it here, the image clip box, we can pass the clip class equal to this class right here, clip contact clip path 1, and we can pass a source equal to this source right here. Then we can just get the source from the props, and we can also get the class name from the props as well by referring to the clip class property. If you do that, it's still here. But now that allows us to duplicate it very easily right here below, change the contact clip path to 2, give it a property of on large devices, translate by 40 in the Y direction, and translate Y 60 typically. And let's change the image to contact 2. If you do that, you cannot see it just yet, but we will be able to see it once we add the text. This will add this second image right here. Now we can scroll a bit down and exit this div, but we can create another div to absolutely position a second image. So what I'll do is copy this initial div that we had, paste it, properly close it, and we can change it from minus left 20 to minus top 40, and left dash 20. We'll remove the h full and the hidden property, make it w of 60, remove all of these overflows, and I'll apply some additional properties to make it look good on other devices. Like on small devices, top will be 1/2. On medium devices, left will be auto. On medium devices, right will be 10. On large devices, top will be 20. And on large devices, W will be 80. And I think right here in this one, I forgot to provide the top value. This right here was supposed to be top 0. There we go. Now it looks a bit better. Now within this one, we can apply 2 new image clip boxes. So let's copy it. And let me put the source first so it's easier to see what we're rendering, and change the image path to swordman. Swordman-partial.webp, and change the class name to absolute. On medium devices, scale of 125. There we go. You can start seeing it right here. And I will duplicate it below. I'll change the image to swordman. This one will not be partial. And I'll enter the class name of sword-man-clip-path. And on medium devices, scale of 125. So now we'll be able to see it even on smaller devices where it will appear as a full image. Great. Now we can go below this div, wrapping these 2 image clip boxes, and we can render another div which will contain the text. So let's give it a class name equal to flex, flex-call, items-center, text-center, and within it, I'll render a p tag with a class name equal to font-general, text-10 pixels, and uppercase. And within it, I'll say join Zentry. So this is the final call to action. There we go. Below it, I'll render another p tag, which will say, let's build the new era of gaming together, like this. But of course, we can make it much more exciting. So let me put it here and give it a class name equal to special-font, margin top of 10, W-full, font-Zentry, text-5XL, so very large, leading-0.9, on medium devices, text-6 rem, like this. And now it's huge. We can also apply some breaks, like right here after the word the, we're gonna add a break, and maybe also before the word gaming, we can apply another break. This is looking good. We can also use those special characters. It would be a shame not to use them because this text is so big. So let's do it on the U in build. There we go. I'll add a bold. Let's also do it right here under A in gaming. Not too much, just on a couple of different characters. And we can add it on O in the word together. So as you know, I'm just bolding the characters in order to achieve that special character look. Let's build the new era of gaming together. Great. Finally, below the p tag, we can have a button that'll have a title equal to contact us, a container class of margin top of 10, and a class of cursor dash pointer. There we go. That's much better. Now, if you check this in full screen, it's going to look absolutely amazing. And if you collapse it a bit, you can see here we are going a bit over the text. I agree. You could do some additional fixes, but if you collapse it further, you can notice that it looks great on mobile as well. And the last thing we have to do is implement the footer section. So I'll close this one and head over into the footer. And trust me, this will be the simplest section of them all, where we'll turn this into an HTML5 semantic footer tag with a class name equal to w-screen. And we'll use a bit of a different color here, BG of violet 300 with a padding Y of 4 and text-black. There we go. We see it at the bottom. Within it, I'll render a div that'll have a class name equal to container, margin X of auto, flex, flex-call, items-center, justify-between, gap of 4, padding X of 4, and then medium devices, flex of row. And then we can render a p tag that's going to say something like, well, we can copy it from the final website, at Nova 2024, all rights reserved. And I think you can do that copy by saying the and copy sign. That's a bit of a more proper way to do it. So you use the and copy and then semicolon, which will render the copyright sign. We can give this p a class name of text-center, text-small, font-light, or no, let's keep it normal. And on medium devices, we want to left align it. So text-left. Great, but now what matters more are the actual links that we want to show, pointing to the socials of all of our different platforms. So I'll create a div that'll act as the container for those links. So I can give it a class name of flex, justify-center, gap of 4, and on medium devices, justify-start. Now we need to create an array with all of these different links, which we can do by saying const links is equal to an array of objects where we have an href pointing to that link, which for now can be something like https:// and then we can say something like icon is going to be FA Discord, coming from React icons, FA, and then we can duplicate this over for different social platforms that you like. For example, we can do it for, let's do another href for maybe Twitter. All kind of platforms have different Twitter icons, have different Twitter socials. So we can say icon is going to be FA Twitter, coming from React icons FA. And you could do GitHub if you want to. So I'll add FA GitHub and maybe one more. Let's see what our AI comes up with. Now it's saying GitHub again, but we're going to change this over to maybe something like Twitch, as this is a gaming platform. So FA Twitch. Perfect. Now we can map over these links by saying links.map, where we get each individual link. And for each link, we can automatically return by just putting an anchor tag and properly closing it. It'll render the link.icon. So now you should be able to see 4 different icons at the bottom. But to make them clickable, we have to give it a key equal to link. We have to give it an href equal to link.href. We have to give it a target of _blank, which will open it up in a new screen. And whenever you add that, you also need to add a rel of no opener and no referrer. And we can give it a class name equal to text-black, transition-colors with a duration of 500, ease in, out, and on hover, we can change the text to white. So this will give us this cool effect that when you hover, it appears clickable. Great. Finally, below this div, we can create a final anchor tag that'll have an href pointing to our hash privacy-policy, and it'll have a class name equal to text-center, text-small. On hover, we're gonna do an underline, and on medium devices, we'll position it to the right side. And here we can simply say privacy policy. There we go. Looks great on mobile devices, but as I expand it, everything is nicely positioned and aligned with the start of this rectangle and the end of the rectangle. That's exactly what you want to do. And with that in mind, believe it or not, we are done with this amazing, unique, almost one of a kind, I would say, build. We can scroll to the top, and I think it's the right time to start playing the video. Remember that we turned it off at the start. So I'll head over to the hero section, and I will uncomment this autoplay feature right here and reload, and we get a new video playing. We have a great looking navigation bar, which if you want to, you can make it point to different sections like it is right now. And as you know, we have this great portal, which if you click into it, you will dive into another world or another video. As you scroll, this container will kind of get smaller. And then we have this animated title where you enter into another world that is completely dark. I think this was supposed to say radiant, not radiant. So if I head over to features, to our first bento grid right here, or bento card, I'll say radiant. There we go. That's better. We have this beautiful section that allows us to kind of tilt the cards around to make it feel like we're holding them in our hand. And finally, we have the story of a hidden realm section. Then there's this very prominent call to action button that just invites us to contact them. And finally, a simple footer. And I don't have to show you how it looks like on mobile because you've seen it many, many times so far. And we have developed it mobile first by first developing the mobile UI anyway. So with that in mind, we are ready to get it deployed. So let's go back to our code base one more time, open up an empty terminal and run npm run build. This will allow us to create an optimized production build of our application. Immediately, you'll see a new folder called dist appear right here at the top. So right click it and click open in Finder or in File Explorer if you're in Windows. Once you do that, head back over to your hosting or dashboard to the hosting that you bought for this project and head over to the file manager. Once you're here, enter the public HTML folder and delete the default PHP. Finally, open up the dist and then drag and drop all the files within the dist folder right here. It's going to say uploading 30 files, but trust me, it'll happen in a matter of seconds. So let's pause for a second and I'll be right back once the files are uploaded. And there we go. The files are here. Head back over to your dashboard and click on the domain name you chose. That'll open it up in the browser, but this time on the web. You can see the nice loading that happens for the first time when you run the application. And then we see this nice video play with all of the great features that we previously explored, such as entering different scenes, scrolling down to see these great animations, this little card tilt effect, and more. This was such an interesting build, where we got a chance to explore the intricacies of micro animations. So with that said, huge congratulations on coming to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed teaching it. And if that really is the case, which would make me very happy, then the only thing that makes sense next is for you to get the ultimate Next.js course. I mean, you watched and enjoyed more than 2 hours of this educational YouTube video, so you're gonna love what I do in the Next.js course. There, I teach you how to use Next.js in the way that it has been envisioned for you to use it. But right now, the majority of devs still use it as plain old React, which gives us performance that looks like this. Thankfully, that won't be the case with you, as you will have a whole new approach to learning, with server and client components, boosting your website's performance, discovering all the latest React 19 and Next.js 15 Plus features, and so much more. With deep dive to understand the theory of how everything works behind the scenes, and then a build and deploy of a very complex app with active lessons that allow you to simulate the process of learning and actually make you develop stuff before you just watch these videos like Netflix. You will have to put things into practice. So if that sounds exciting, check it out. The link is down in the description. With that said, Once again, congrats on coming to the end of this course, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.